Hey everyone, it's Ian McCausland back again with another conversation. Thrilled to have Mike Deal here today. Thanks, Mike.
No problem.
Photojournalist with the Winnipeg Free Press. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey to become a photojournalist. And so, Mike, maybe just start about talking about photography. Where did it come from?
Well, back in high school in the dark ages, I was introduced to photography by a friend who lent me his film camera, and we took pictures for the yearbook. That's how I kind of got interested in photography. It was one of those things where the darkroom at the school hadn't been used in a few years, and one of the teachers said, "Hey, let's open up the darkroom and figure it out and learn how to print black and white prints and stuff." And so we did. And it was really interesting. And that was when I was like, found out that through research, learning how to process film, that you can make one in your house for almost nothing. So I pretty much instantly turned a basement room into a dark room and kind of started taking pictures, processing film. And I don't even remember what I was shooting at that time, probably nothing good. And then I started going to the University of Manitoba, and my intention was to be an actuary or some kind of finance person. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, I had really no idea what I wanted to do, but I felt that it was going to be money somehow, as young people tend to think that money is the goal, right? And I quickly learned that that's not what I wanted to do, and I ended up spending most of my time at the University of Manitoba student newspaper, the Manitoban. I like to tell people that I went to the University of Manitoban, and at that point I was a volunteer photographer and shot film, black and white, and then the next year I was the photo editor. The year after that I was the production manager at the student paper, which was to do layout and kind of put the paper together.
Was it all paste up? Or?
Yeah, it was all with the wax machines that you put through and cutting with X-Acto knives. So it was all very basic. Actually, when I became the production manager, we had transitioned to printing out on laser printers.
Laser printers, yeah.
Yeah, that was when we started doing that. And we were actually still putting the big pages through the wax machine and putting them on the big flats.
Because you still had to send boards over.
Yeah. So that was what I did. And at the end of the year when I was the photo editor, I had applied to two photojournalism schools, Loyalist and SAIT, one in Calgary and one in Southern Ontario. I got into both. And then the people who were running the paper came and asked me if I wanted to be the production manager. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. So I turned down both the school things, which, whatever. I decided I didn't want to go to school, and then did that year and then reapplied to SAIT in Calgary. I decided that it would be way more expensive to go out to Ontario to Loyalist, and I had family in Alberta. So I decided to go to Calgary, and I went there in the mid-90s. And when I came back, or rather in my last year, I did an internship at the Free Press. And that's where I kind of met all the photographers, all the people that were working there, and realized that these guys are awesome, and I wanted to work with them. And that was when I kind of decided that, like normally when you finish photojournalism school, you go to the small papers and sort of work your way around and try and get to the big papers. And I decided at the end of that internship that I wasn't going to do that, that this was going to be where I was going to work, and I would do everything I could to actually be there. So after school, I had no prospects at the paper because I had just done an internship and they weren't really doing a lot of freelance with people. Although they did have a few people that were kind of like the main freelancers. You remember Jody?
Mm-hmm.
Big hair.
Yeah.
He was an awesome guy. And Ruth was doing freelance for them. And who else? Can't remember. But Jody did like a huge amount of freelance for them. So much so that they had to actually pull back because he was, working more than the staff photographers and making more than they were. And I remember at one point he kind of got sick or something, and he gave me a call and said, "Can you do some of this stuff for me? Because I need to cut back on the amount of work I'm doing." And that was it. My foot was in the door, freelance-wise. It was a freelance gig.
Yeah.
And I think I made like $200 a month. It wasn't a lot. but it was enough to get some assignments. I think that would have been like 5 assignments a month.
And did you have another job while you were?
Yeah, I had other jobs. Actually, I worked at Black Photography,
Uh-huh.
and then I transitioned to Dawn's,
Right.
and I worked at the Main Street store. And at one point, I decided that I needed to make change. I'd worked in the camera stores for like 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years, and I decided I need to do something because I don't want to get caught working in a camera store for the rest of my life, because I just didn't want to be in sales. In fact, when I went to apply for the Dawn's photo job, I told them I wanted to work in the darkroom. I wanted to print because I didn't really want to sell cameras, but they told me that that's not a possibility, but you can sell cameras for us. And I was like, okay, whatever. I got a discount on camera gear. But at a certain point, I decided that I needed to make change. I had to force change because it wasn't going to happen, and I wasn't getting a huge amount of work from the Free Press, and I was worried that this would just continue. So I quit, and this was just around 1998, and I decided I was going to ride my bike across the country from Winnipeg to Calgary. And, well, that's not really across the country, but from Winnipeg to Calgary, it's a lot of country.
Yeah.
And I'd never really ridden my bike more than like 15 blocks. It wasn't like I was a cyclist, but I wanted to do something that was going to challenge me and whatever in that way, right? To try and force change. And like 2 days before I was going to jump, it was in the beginning of September. A friend of mine from back in school, high school, actually junior high school, his dad died. And I sort of was like, well, I gotta go to that. Like, I gotta go to that funeral, which was 2 days away. So I went to that. And I had packed my bike. The panniers were full. I had food, everything in there ready to roll. And then there was this horrible storm, and I couldn't go. And then, the week spread into 2 weeks. And then 3 weeks, and then it was the end of September, and I was like, I can't. Temperatures dropped like a stone. There's no way I'm going to do this now. So I kind of got stuck. I had quit my job at Dawn's, and I actually went back to them and said, look, I just need a little bit of part-time work. And that's when I got another call from Jody and saying, I need you to do more work. So I started doing more and more and more, and kind of took off. If I hadn't left, or if I had gone, I probably wouldn't have
been there
for that call from Jody. And things kind of just got more and more. And then in the year 2000, I switched to digital, which is like the minute Canon came out with their D30 or 30D, was their was their consumer digital camera.
Yeah.
Which is like our if you've got a camera on a watch, it's better than that camera was. But I switched. I was a Nikon shooter, film, switched, sold everything, all the camera bodies. I kept most of the lenses, and switched to Canon. Started shooting digital, and all of a sudden I started getting more and more freelance work from the paper. And at the time, the Free Press had kind of 2 freelance streams. There was the news desk stream, the stuff that you would get from the photo editor, like news assignments and stuff. And then there's the kind of quasi-advertising, like the automotives and the home section.
Right.
And there was the community review or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
I got changed to Neighbors or something like that. And so there was 2 streams, and Jody was in the automotive home side of it.
Right.
And then once I switched to digital, Yon started being like, well, he's switching to digital, maybe we should, throw me some news stuff. And I started doing more and more, and then a job came up. One of the night photo editors quit, and it was a part-time position, and I applied for it and got it. And my training was like in the beginning of September, but my first day on the job was supposed to be September 12th, 2001. And that didn't really work out because of the attacks in New York. And on September 11th, I just sort of was like, I was supposed to be like sleeping in and taking the day and resting, and that totally didn't happen. I just immediately went into the office, and it was like a madhouse. All this pictures that were being printed off, and all the stuff that was coming in, and all the decisions that were trying to be decided about what photo would be on the front and all the different things that were going on. And it was amazing. The learning that I did in that week that followed 9/11 was just incredible. And then, I didn't actually be the night part-time photo editor until like a week and a half later when things started calming down.
Right.
At that point, I was allowed to be on my own. And I did that for 5 years. Sometime in 2006, things changed a bit, and I became a part-time shooter. And then and at the same time, my part-time shooter included doing full-time hours. So I was kind of like a full-time photographer, but still classified as a part-time employee. And I did that for a couple of years, and then one of our photographers left, and I got hired as a full-time photographer in 2008. So that's sort of like a kind of the short story about how I became a photographer at the Free Press. But when I got first hired in September of 2001, it was not to be a photographer. It was expressly told to me that I wouldn't be a photographer. And I thought, well, I'll be able to pick up some freelance work still because I can still do that as a part-time employee. And I did. I did some freelance stuff. But my initial plan was like, I'm going to give myself 10 years doing this, and if things don't transition to being the staff photographer, I'll have to figure it out, some other plan, right?
Right.
Because I had a goal to be a staff photographer at a newspaper, and I succeeded. Within 8 years I was hired, but I hadn't really thought about the consequences of what happens if I get to 10 years and I'm still the part-time night guy, night desk editor. I didn't really think of what I would do, but I kind of had this sense that, I'm going to give it 10 years and see what happens. And luckily I managed to do a lot of things right. And I don't know what they were specifically, but I managed to be there when the hiring process was happening and got the job.
So when you were on the night desk, were you doing lots of shooting
I would do
on your own?
Yeah, well, I did do I had a number of freelance clients, and majority of my freelance work was with the Free Press. So when I worked Thursday and Friday and Saturday night. That was what I did for 8 years. Like I lost my ability to go out on the weekend because I worked. But all the other times I would be available to shoot freelance for Yon, and that's what I did. So when someone was sick, I'd be there to take pictures, and so I kind of was working part-time as the night desk editor and part-time as a photographer there, but it was as a freelancer.
So weekends, you're working for like 8 years.
Yeah, I've been working weekends. I haven't stopped working weekends. I now work Sundays, so my weekends are Friday and Saturday. And I've been doing that for a number of years, since 2010-ish.
One of the things I always talk about to sort of up-and-coming photographers is the amount of effort that it takes to get to where, like some people would look at where you are now and just say, I want to be there,
right,
without understanding the amount of time and commitment that it took to get there.
Right. Well, I just had a similar conversation with my daughter. She's 10, and she wants to be a chef. So she was asking me today, like, well, how do you become a chef? Like, how do you get to be, like, how do you do chefs make a lot of money? And I was like, well, do you want to make money, or do you want to be happy? Right? So you got to choose. Sometimes those things work out together, but sometimes they don't. So you could be happy, but you're not making a lot of money. Do you want to do that, or would you rather be unhappy and make more money? It's just some decisions you got to make in the future. But one of the first things you're going to experience is when you're getting a job is that it might not be the actual job you want. Like you have to look at it as a learning experience. So your goal is that target there, but it's going to be a lot of steps to get there. And maybe the steps go this way and you have to figure out how to get back. I was fortunate in that I got in on the ground floor of the job I wanted. I became a unionized member of the people that worked there. So I kind of, as soon as I became a unionized member, I was pretty much shoo-in for whenever a job posting was put it up.
Right.
So I was lucky in that regard. But when you first start out, you have to sort of figure out how much time do you want to devote to eating noodles with the hope that at the end of this time you're going to be where you want to be.
Right.
Are you willing to give up financial gain to like I said before we were talking here, the first month that I was freelancing for the Free Press, I made $200. I had to borrow money from my parents to pay my rent. So that happened for like 2 or 3 months. But the more I worked for them, the more they knew how I worked and liked what I was doing, the more work I got from them.
Mm-hmm.
And a year later, I was making like $1,500 a month with them, and then a year later than that, I was making more. So it was a progression,
mm-hmm.
and you have to be prepared to give up a lot.
Yeah.
The coffee at the Starbucks, all that kind of stuff. You got to be prepared to maybe not do that every day, and work hard, prove yourself. Right? You're not going to. It's the rare person that will show themselves to be hot photographer and be hired without having to go through all those processes. Yeah. Right?
There's no shortcut.
There are no shortcuts. I've seen the shortcuts being done though. I mean, every once in a while you see a photographer who's just unbelievable. They're so personable. People love them the minute they meet them, and they're really got a great eye. They can take amazing photos, and they get snapped up by a large newspaper or whatever. But who knows how long they're going to work there, because sometimes people get hired super young and they haven't gone through life experiences, and they're forced to deal with some heavy stuff as a newspaper photographer sometimes, and but there is something to be said for learning step by step. To go back to the conversation I was telling my daughter, it was like you might find yourself looking at your first job as being maybe working at Subway, but you're learning how to make sandwiches. But there's a lot of other things you're going to be learning, like how to clean your kitchen.
Right.
Like, those are things the basics that you're going to have to learn that you'll carry over to being the famous chef that you want to be. Right. You'll learn all those things, but you have to start somewhere. And if you figure out those things as you go along, you don't have to keep that job at Subway for 10 years. You can learn things you need to learn and try and go up from there. Everything you do, in my opinion, is a learning experience. I learn something new every day at the Free Press. Well, not every day, but every week. There's always something that's different. That's one of the great things about working for a newspaper, I think, is that there's the assignments are different. You don't have the same clients like you might have if you're a commercial photographer. Everything is different. Now we've got all these things like video and multimedia and all this stuff. So the learning process for me is not school; it's learning on the job.
Right.
I'm now the de facto video editor at the paper since we've lost a few staff members, and everything I'm doing, every day I'm learning new things about video editing, what to do and mostly what not to do. But yeah.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to make sure I had a chance to talk to you, because I think that's important that people recognize that, in a lot of people's eyes, once you've reached the goal, you've become that Free Press photographer you've always wanted to be, but you haven't stopped learning, and you also haven't stopped challenging yourself. Like I would think back to that.
Couples now 4 years ago.
What year was it?
2013.
2013 portraits.
Yeah,
the year of 2013.
Yes. In the fall of the previous year, I kind of felt I was in a rut. I felt like, the other thing about being a newspaper photographer is that you could build a calendar and then the following year follow that calendar and you shoot all the same assignments, because
there's seasonal aspects to the job.
There's very much seasonal aspects to the job. You're guaranteed you're going to be at Festival de Voyageur every year. Guaranteed you're going to be shooting something, like any kind of celebration every year. And after like a number of years, you might realize, well, I feel like I've done that. How can I do that differently? So sometimes you feel like you're getting into a rut, that you're not actually doing anything new or different. So in that fall of 2012, I was thinking, what can I do? And the idea had come to maybe shoot some kind of like project of something that would take me the whole course of the year, like a 360 project or something that
Yeah.
I was trying, at the time I was trying to think of what to do, and then David Lipnowski, a fellow photographer, announced on Facebook that he was going to do a picture of portrait a day. And I was like, well, now I can't do that because he's doing it. He's already announced it. So I was trying to think, what can I do that would still challenge me and be able to be something I have to do consistently and constantly throughout the year. And I thought I have to take it to another level. And one of the things was I really wanted to shoot the pictures with my phone, because at the time in 2013, the iPhone, I think I had the iPhone 4, it was kind of, you were getting decent quality photos out of it. And, they weren't amazing, but they were, you could do a lot of interesting things with them. And the idea had come to me that I would do portraits with that. And then it was for whatever, I don't know where 2013 portraits came from, but that's what I came up with. And in many respects, I think that was like the craziest thing, because really that was a lot. It doesn't sound like a huge number, but when you put it in, like when you break it down to daily, it would be like 5.5 portraits a day. But you're not taking pictures every day.
No, well,
well, you could, but it would be really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm talking like, I'm sure when you've talked to David.
He's already told me.
Yeah,
he says, I can't believe I did a portrait a day. Like
right, because you go up and ask people and they say no. And you're like, okay. And then you're looking around and you start asking other people.
Yeah,
and then a lot of people say no.
Yeah.
Because they don't know who the heck you are. I mean, I think I had it lucky in the sense, if you're comparing the two, because my spiel was that I'm a photographer with the Winnipeg Free Press, which sort of gives you some sort of like
there's a cachet there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
So I would say, I'm a photographer with the Winnipeg Free Press. I'm doing this portrait project where I'm trying to shoot this crazy number of photos, and they're not like sophisticated images. I'm not bringing out flashes and things, like I'm not doing made for. It's just portraits, headshots, and I'm doing it with my phone. Would you mind? And they're like, sure, whatever. Click. I take 2 or 3 photos, and then I'm done. I take their name down, and then I go to the next person. And I found that, it became a situation where 2 or 3, like about this time, in mid-February, I was like, I'm like a couple hundred behind already. I felt like I was really far behind, and I just started it. And because I was maybe shooting 2 or 3 a day, and then I'd have my weekends, and I wasn't shooting anything, and then so you would fall back really far, really quickly. And I thought, this is not going to work. And so I had to figure out how to do it. And that meant going to events. Like I'd go to a marathon. Like there's almost one every weekend.
Yeah.
Where there's a group of people meeting to run. So I'd show up before everything started, and people came. I'd give them and there's all these people, and they're all excited to do their thing, and they're open to having their picture taken. So I would get like 20 or 30 photos from that, and I'd be like, oh, that was pretty awesome for a single day. But I was still pretty far behind. And it wasn't until the folk festival that I really kicked butt, because 3 days at the folk festival, I shot like 300 portraits. And I was like, wow,
that's volume.
That was volume. That was a lot of portraits. I got sunburned. I was just basically walking up to every single person I could see. And I mean, when you've got that many people there, like 10,000 people, it's not hard to just walk up to people. But the whole point of that challenge was to force me to go and just talk to people, because it's not something I do naturally. I'm not really super outgoing, and so part of it was to learn how to be a little more open and just go randomly and chat with people, because everybody kind of has a story.
Yeah.
And my opinion at the time was to learn how to just approach people and sort of see if you can break the ice somehow and introduce yourself. And then that whole project led off to something that kind of fizzled out for me because other work got in the way. But the idea was to go out and do that kind of thing with people and just interview them and chat with them and take their picture and just sort of see if they've got a story. So that project worked out. I managed to finish it. The last photo I took was of myself. I figured, what the heck. But if I was to do it again, I would not do it again.
Well, it's only getting harder, right?
Yes, it is.
Like,
yeah. Yeah, but
an extra portrait
yeah.
added every year.
I would be willing to do like another portrait project, but not something where I'd have to be shooting consistently every day.
And there again, I know David said the same thing. He's like, I don't know.
It was a
if
lot
I
of
could ever
fun,
do
but I don't
that.
think I could physically or mentally do it again.
Yeah.
Simply because the anxiety that was created, I'm sure.
The
If I had
self-imposed
a blood pressure issue at that point in my life, if I didn't have one, I know I have one now because the anxiety was pretty intense. There's some sleepless nights.
But really, nobody would have faulted you if you
No,
hadn't gotten
not at
that.
all. But it's a challenge that you put to yourself.
Right.
In fact, it was difficult when I was doing my spiel. Like I would tell people that I've been challenged, and they would be like, "Who's challenged you?" And in my head, I'm thinking myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say that because it kind of would feel awkward, right? Because I'm challenging myself to do this. But I would tell people that I've been challenged by someone, like the paper. I wouldn't say it that way, but I'd be like,
Yeah.
I've got this challenge I must complete, and you need to help me. Wasn't quite begging, but it was pretty close.
I know I've taken your experience and David's experience and sort of, learned from it when I approached only 50 for my
Right.
50
You're
project, right? Because I thought, 50, that's one a week.
Yeah, that's still pretty tough.
Still,
isn't it?
it's still a challenge because I've last 2 weeks I haven't done one,
Oh yeah.
and it's like okay.
Well,
they're starting to ramp
you've
up,
got you've got a
I can-
small field of people that you can.
and we talk. I mean, you can talk about that a little bit about creating these parameters or these challenges for yourself and how it kind of drives you artistically.
Right.
Like for you, it was using the phone.
Right.
It's like you were carrying all that gear.
Yeah.
But the project was based
right.
on using
like,
a really rudimentary app on your phone, right?
90% of those photos, I had my DSLRs with me, but I would not use them specifically because of the challenge. But it's kind of like using lo-fi. It felt like I'm stepping down, trying to. And the phone itself has restrictions, which kind of help because then you don't have to worry about which lens do I use, what film do I use. Although what processing I did afterwards, I had to. One of the other parts of the challenge was I had to use Hipstamatic, the app, to process all the photos. They kind of had to. I felt that they needed to be put through a process. It couldn't just be shot with the camera.
Kind of, you needed to unite it in some sense.
Yeah,
right?
there needed to be a kind of a unified force somewhere in there to make everything kind of look similar, but look different, right? So that was part of it, and I was so lucky halfway through the project that the company that makes the app came out with a new app that they at the time, which was called Ogle. And it allowed you to change the filters after you've taken the photo.
Oh, right on, yeah.
Because up until then, you had to choose the filter before you took the photo, which was not a problem. But then when you're trying to shoot 30 or 40 portraits, you don't want them all to look the same, so you're trying to change the filter, then take the pictures,
right.
so that there's some difference in the photos. But then once they came out with that app, I would just take pictures and then process them afterwards.
Yeah.
So that worked out well. It sort of caused my workflow to be less strict. And allowed me to feel less pressure. So that was good. But it was a really interesting way to learn how to use the phone too, as a tool in a photojournalism bag of tricks, right? It allowed me to, I would never use Hipstamatic to shoot my jobs, but it allowed me to figure out what the good qualities of the phone were, like the battery life and knowing what you had to do when things started to go sideways with the phone. So
did it also sort of free you up in the sense that we can get a little bit sucked in with the lure of the gear, right?
Yes.
And it's like, I need a 70-200 2.8 to make a decent portrait, right?
Yeah.
And it's like my vision is my vision regardless if I have my phone
right.
or a DSLR.
Yeah, it became less about the gear for sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the photos, there's a fair number of photos in that project that I really like. Like I occasionally will go back through some of those photos and be like, yeah, that was a really good photo. And I would love if I had the income to be printing them out and putting them up places. I have a couple places where I have them, but I would love to change them more frequently to be able to show all the different photos that were taken. But yeah, using the phone force you to step back away from the gear question, right? About what lens to use and all that kind of thing. No flash. Although I did have an LED flash. Because there was some, not flash, an LED light that I would use when things kind of got dark. Because the phone only has certain
sensitivity.
Yeah, you had to. There were times when you had to introduce lights, and that little LED light really helped a lot to get some pictures. Because you'd be inside places, and the light would be brutal.
Yeah.
So you'd have to introduce light.
Now you've got your own personal website as well.
Yeah, I use it to sort of showcase the pictures that I like that I shoot at the paper.
Oh yeah.
A lot of them are on the
But
job.
you shoot when you're not working as well, though. It feels like.
Yeah, I
Like
do.
you're one of the guys that I
Occasionally.
think about. Is like you don't necessarily hang the camera up at the end of the day. Like you're a photographer.
I'm not as
full
proficient.
time.
I'm not like Colin Cornell, who takes pictures. It seems like constantly,
Right.
which is awesome. I hats off. But I do. I try to take my camera everywhere. I didn't bring it today. Actually, I was driving here.
It's all right.
I was driving here thinking I had to rush out of the house because I realized I was going to be late, and I thought I left my camera behind. I didn't turn around.
Oh, you got your phone.
I know I have my phone,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do take. I try to take pictures when I'm out and about.
For some people, at this point in their careers, at a similar point as you, or even for myself, they do the work and then they go home.
Yeah, I've experienced that. Actually, this past year, I went through a number of months where, yeah, I would come home, hang that camera up, and not think
Yeah.
about it, or try not to think about it. And I think that has a lot to just do with, being tired and stuff. And I started thinking about I got to get back to doing a challenge on myself.
Well, I was going to ask if
because
you had anything in mind. Yeah.
there are times when you feel like you take pictures so often, and sometimes you don't. The act of taking pictures doesn't make you happy anymore. Like the adrenaline rush isn't there when you're taking pictures, and when that happens, you don't necessarily realize it's happening. But when that happens, I sort of have tried to, and I've realized it. I've tried to figure out ways to get out of that rut. I call it a rut. When you experience things are not, the challenge of taking pictures is not there anymore, and so when you go home, you just sort of try to put things aside and be with your family, which is an important part of my life. But you got to figure out ways to keep that picture taking part of you happy, because learning and experiencing good photos pushes you to keep doing more, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I've kind of transitioned at work is to be shooting more video. So a lot of my challenging of myself, personal challenges, are kind of centered around video. And I've got a few ideas that are in the irons that are in the fire, so to speak. I've got a big project that I'm just finishing up in the next week or two that we've been working on for almost 8 months at the paper. I've been basically thrown into shooting a documentary. I've never shot one. I don't know how to shoot one. Don't know if I should be telling people that. But it's something that you do, that happens at organizations. You're shooting a photo project and it turns into this bigger thing. And you got to figure out how to make it work. So I'm in the process of figuring that out right now. Once that's out of the way, I've got some ideas for some projects. But I don't want to spill the beans.
No, that's cool. No, you don't want to.
But yeah, when you finally reach that stage in your career where this is the job that I've always wanted.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that job for a number of years, and you're like, well, what is there? What else is there, right? So you've got to come up with those things yourself. No one's going to hand you that, amazing assignment. You got to figure those things out yourself, and sometimes it's doing a photo a day challenge with your iPhone, or I don't know. You got to. There's all kinds of artistic things you can do with photography, right? One of the things I want to do with you would be to take out our 4x5 cameras,
right,
and do something. It would, not in the winter, but in the spring or something.
Yeah.
We should
dust them off.
and go street shooting.
Well, and then
street shooting with our
street
4x5.
shooting, yeah, that would be awesome. Actually, that'd be fun.
It would be.
Yeah.
Because I a couple weeks ago I pulled it out and I was like, I've got somewhere a box in my basement. I've got film. So I found the film and I remembered how to load the camera.
I got all the holders you need.
Yeah, I got holders too. In fact, the first shot I did, I misloaded the film in the holder.
So it popped out?
Yeah.
Right.
So actually, I took the picture and I was trying to put the slider back
it didn't go in.
It didn't go in.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong?
Because it's not underneath those grooves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I screwed that one up, but the second shot was perfect. And I did it in my house. I took a picture of my daughter and I actually used a flash.
Oh, neat.
I attached a flash to the 4x5 camera and fired that off and processed it, and it worked. It was a little flat. I'll have to figure out why that was, but I use a tube to process, and I have a feeling that maybe my dilution was a little too diluted, maybe, I don't know. Anyways, when I scanned it and processed it on a computer, it looked great. So I was very happy. Second shot after, like, I think it's been 15 years that I actually used that thing. And I would love to, I have this, I don't know what they're called, but I have 3 of them. They're backs that take 6 frames.
The multi-load backs?
Yeah, I'll have to figure out
the
how to...
spring-loaded ones?
I don't know. I would actually, I'm going to have to learn how to use it again.
Yeah.
Because I'll probably just screw it up.
That's the one where you put the film through these, into these leaves, and then it spring loads and pushes the next one up.
Yeah. So I've got 3 of those. So
you could do 18 frames.
I know.
And it would only be about this thick.
Yeah. So, and I got those when I was working at Don's Photo. Someone was trying to sell stuff on consignment, and I was like, and this was back when they would let employees buy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, seems weird that would be
They
allowed.
did that at Sam's too.
Yeah. But anyways.
You buy everything.
Yes.
I've owned so many cameras.
Yeah.
And then I trade them in about a month later.
Yeah. I bought a Nikon F1, I think. F.
Yeah, the F. I owned one of those too, and then I traded it back in.
I actually ended up selling it to someone, and I didn't realize that the meter on it was off by a stop. So they figured it out really quick, and then I had to pay for the fix of the meter. But whatever. It was an awesome camera.
That is a legendary camera.
When you take pictures with that, it sounds like it's chopping carrots.
Yeah.
Just the sound of that shutter is like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta admit, working at a camera store, you learn a lot about different cameras, right?
And I've met photographers who were working in the city at the time.
Right.
This was like the late 90s, mid 90s, who I would never have met.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember half their names, but these guys would come in and they'd have all their 120 rolls, and they'd sit and chat with you. And who's that short photographer he would use the 4x5 and he would do a lot of school.
Barney Schreck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super nice guy. I think he passed
Legend.
away.
Just passed away a little while ago.
Yeah. And the fact that I got to meet him.
Yeah.
Is like, I think back on that, like I would never have met him if I didn't work at Don's, and I felt.
And it
really
goes back
good.
even further, because I remember I worked with a guy at Sam's back in the 80s, and he worked at Hydro back in the 60s and 70s, and he said the Chirac brothers had a studio down on Portage, and that's where everyone went for their headshots back in the 40s and 50s.
No kidding.
Yeah, like legends, man.
Yes.
Legends. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I even met Leo Mole working at Don's Photo.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I would never have met a famous sculptor except for the fact that he came in with film every once in a while. So I feel that having worked at Don's Photo helped me in my career in the sense that I learned a lot by talking to photographers as they came in and figured out what kind of gear they were using and the ways they did things, and they would show you pictures after they've shot it and when they're picking up their film and stuff like that. It was great. And then you would get to touch the cameras before they actually get sold. Like brand new cameras come in. I got to handle the Nikon F3 or F4 or F5.
Yeah.
Those were all pretty cool cameras.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the Don's at the time wasn't like massive. It wasn't like B&H Photo. But, there was interesting gear that came in. It was used and new. So, yeah, it was a cool place.
And I mean, back then, photography was a very technically daunting craft in terms of there was so much science and junk involved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, it's kind of for the science geek in you, it was very exciting.
Yes.
But you can see how, you know, it was a predominantly male
It was.
field,
Right.
And then you had to have all this chemistry and all
Yeah.
this other science background
Well,
to
photography-
make anything happen.
Right, yeah. Photography was part being a chemist and part being like a math whiz. Like you had to do
there's some
calculations.
physics in there,
Yeah, you had to figure out numbers in your head, like distance for flash.
a little bit of engineering.
Yeah.
You had to kludge something
Yeah,
together.
and at that time, those kind of careers were not prominent for women.
No.
So yeah, and well, you see way more women photographers now, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the tendencies for folks like us who've been at it for a long time can sound like we lament those old days a little bit.
A
But
little
I
bit,
think
not really.
I think the move to digital obviously was a big deal.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And because you were an early adopter,
Yeah.
and relatively
not
quick.
having to have like horrible, weird, dry hands because you're handling
yeah,
chemicals.
the psoriasis from the
Oh,
chemistry and the
That was
fumes from being encased in a small room for
Yeah.
hours.
yeah, and being
Yeah.
in the dark for
Yeah.
That in many ways I like that I'm not doing that anymore. Although I reminisce about it because
Yeah, we
once-
romanticize it
Yes,
now, don't we?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind going back into a dark room for a couple hours, but not every day and not
No.
for many hours a day, which
Yeah.
was what it was.
Yeah.
When I worked at the student press at Manitoba, and I would be in there for like literally 8 hours.
Yeah.
I'd be processing and printing photos, and I would never want to go back to that. I mean, now I end up spending 5 hours in front of a computer, which is almost as bad sometimes. But yeah, I mean, you can do so much more efficient photo editing now on a computer than you could before. So.
And the other exciting part about it is you can realize your vision a lot easier now, right? Like,
You didn't have many options when you were printing black and white.
right.
You had you could do the hand of God look with the heavy burning and dodging, or straight out of the. That's why film was so important, because the contrast that the film and the paper provided were really important, because there was a lot less manipulation and more just straight. Here it is, straight out of the film. But you could increase the contrast or decrease the contrast, and that was pretty much it.
Pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you see next for your career?
Next, having, like I said, I'm kind of the de facto video editor at the paper. We've in the last 2.5 years, we kind of lost our video team to other organizations, and the paper isn't really hiring right now, although I hope that they will in the new year. But right now, I'm kind of the video guy. So
Does the video part of it excite you as much as the stills,
Not-
or does it feel like you're kind of like being taken away from stills? Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I'm being taken away from stills, because I look back, like every year in January, we're required to sort of go back over the previous year, pull out our favorite photos, and kind of submit them to contests and stuff. And I'm not a big submitter for contests. I tried to do the monthly contests that we have for newspapers, but it's such a hard thing to keep up on. But this year, when I went back and looked at my photos, I was mildly disappointed, because I realized that I had spent so much time working on projects that were video related that I did less still shooting. And so in a way, I felt like, it would be nice to be able to shoot more. But I think that, when you can allow difficult circumstances to take over, or you can try and make change, which is what I hope to do once this big project's out of the way. I want to take more stills, but I'm kind of the video guy. So I have to figure out a way to force the video situation into allowing me to take more stills. So I kind of have to figure out a way to mold it to make it work for me. But having said that, shooting video has opened my eyes to other ways of presenting the news. And I think working at a newspaper where you don't have a huge budget and the audience is not getting any younger, you have to figure out ways to introduce news to a younger audience. And whether that's I like to say last year, but it feels like it's probably a little bit longer than that because this past year has gone by so fast for me. Sort of, we did a Lego video project, which was so fun to do. It was for the federal election. I would love to have been able to do more of that, but it takes a lot of planning and work involved. And you can't just do that in a day. And I work at a daily newspaper. How do you introduce something that takes a long time, like 3 or 4 days? How do you pull yourself out of the daily work schedule to do one project, right?
Yeah.
So it's figuring out how to get people on board to say, yes, you can go do that. That sounds like an awesome idea. So I got to figure out those things, how to press the right buttons with your managers and editors. And I think I have with a couple projects I have on hopefully on the go. But it's about learning new ways to shoot stills through video. So take your what you know shooting stills, apply it to the video, and figure out ways to turn that around to shooting more stills. For instance, there's a photographer. He doesn't work at the San Francisco Chronicle anymore. His name is Mike Kepka, and he did a column called City Exposed at the San Francisco Chronicle, and I basically wish that that's what I could do. He basically San Francisco has a lot of characters,
yeah.
And so what he would do is he would go and talk to people and shoot little video stories about them, and they're beautiful and short and like really visually interesting and compelling. And I would love to be able to do that at the paper because they were like video portraits, but very well produced. And I feel like I'm starting to approach that point in time where I feel like I could produce something like that, similar to that in the sense of quality.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully something similar to that will happen in the next year or so.
Where can people see your work?
Okay, clearly you can go to the Winnipeg Free Press website. But I have a website, and for some reason I thought this was cute at the time, but it's probably not the best website name, but it's WPG for Winnipeg, and PHO.TO. So it's kind of a Winnipeg photo, but
with the dot in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool.
So if you go to that, you'll see my kind of portfolio site. That's what I call it. Because I mean, in theory, all the photos most of them belong to the Free Press, but because I treat myself as an artist in the sense that I partially own copyright with them. They own it. They can do whatever they want. But I feel like I can show my stuff.
Yeah, you have to showcase your work, right?
Yeah, so that's where you can see it. I sometimes forget to post photos, and then I remember, and then start posting a bunch at once. But there's stuff there, and you can go back over a couple of years and see some of the stuff that I've shot.
Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this talk.
No problem.
It was a lot of fun. I'm so glad that you agreed to do it.
Well, I can't wait to see some of your other photographers.
Yes, I've got Colin on the weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I've got a couple other in the works. So it should be interesting.
Very cool.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.